Hello, I'm Dave Quinton. Like most Newfoundlanders, I've often wondered about the roots of our people. Who were they? Where did they come from? What sort of life did they leave behind when they first set sail for these rugged shores? Tonight, in this special hour-long production of Land and Sea, we'll try to find the answers to some of these questions. We'll follow two Newfoundlanders on a trip that's partly sentimental journey, partly voyage of discovery, back across the sea to the lands of our ancestors. This is the edge of the New World, its northeastern rim, the part of North America that's closest to Europe. It's a rocky coast, wild, rugged, raw. Cathedrals of ice steal down from the north to grind and growl along the coast till they melt and die in the summer sun. There are sudden, spiteful winds and chill, creeping fogs. There are brooding cliffs and crags. A powerful, elemental land, molded by the sea, the wind, the ice. It holds a special magic to those of us who choose to live here. Who are we and where do we come from? Well, most of our ancestors came from England and Ireland a long time ago. First, they sailed here as seasonal fishermen, out in the spring, back home across the ocean in the fall. You see, in the beginning, this was not regarded as a fit place in which to live. The climate was severe, the land rocky, the soil thin. But gradually, those fishermen from the lush landscapes of England and Ireland grew to know and love their newfound land, or as the Irish called it, Talamh, the land of fish. Today, we live in the same coves and fish the same grounds. We still roam the same bays in our boats, hunting the cod, the seal, the herring. Life has changed, yet it's the same. The sea is still our lifeblood, as it's been for hundreds of years. The people of our northern bays and islands are mostly of English descent. Although hundreds of years have passed since our ancestors arrived, and the links with the old country lost generations ago, they say you can still detect the west country of England in the words we use and the way we speak.
Right. Now, Rodney, where's you down? The ropes, all the ropes in, Rodney, they might tangle up out there.
See, you must have run out of places, see, now to come, did you?
Oh, that and crab there. What do you think?
Huh?
The Newfoundland fishery, to the merchants of 17th century Dorset and Devon, a rich treasure just waiting to be caught. And so our people came, and so they stayed, and the outports of Newfoundland took root, and a new way of life evolved. Winterton is an old place. It dates back to the 1600s, when 'twas called Scilly Cove. After the Isles of Scilly, the residents are quick to add. Here, as in most Newfoundland outports, life is still tuned to the sea and the rhythm of the seasons. Although it's 5 or 6 generations back that the last English ships dropped anchor here, England is still fondly regarded as the old country. But it's a dim tribal memory. Centuries have passed since the ancestors of many Winterton people sailed away from the soft land of Dorset. And although the West Country can still be seen in the names and faces and heard in the voices, for most, the old country roots are lost in time. But hints and vague ideas about where we came from are not enough for some people. They must find out more. They become obsessed with tracing their origins, with finding their roots. One such person is Dr. Otto Tucker.
Well, this is Winterton. This is the place where I was born, raised, where I went to school, where I learned so much about life. I go back I go back over 50 years, well over 50 years, and I remember the stories that were told me when I was a child growing up in this community. Many of my close friends were very, very old people. In those days, the old people who were retired lived with their children or their grandchildren, and they had very little else to do but talk. And I was the kind of person, I guess, who just was inspired by the stories they told. But I remember on one occasion when I was about 12 years old, I suppose, one day in school, the teacher was reading the poem. I don't know if you remember that poem. It's a poem by the English writer Thomas Gray, known as The Elegy in the Country Churchyard. And I remember what a grip that held for me, the notions, the ideas in that poem had for me. And I was almost hypnotized by it. And I came out of the little school, jumped over the fence in the little Church of England graveyard, and discovered a new world. Discovered names, for example, that were no longer known in Winterton. I learned, for example, from one tombstone there, that there was a place called Wimborne Minster. There was an actual place called Dorset.
And so the names of Old England, faded now, were copied down in young Otto Tucker's scribbler and carried away from this old Winterton churchyard. Just a moment in a youngster's life, but 'twas enough to launch Otto on a lifelong quest. Someday, somehow, he would leave Winterton and Trinity Bay and visit the land of his ancestors. He would find his roots. Poole in Dorset, a salty old English town if ever there was one. In the 17th and 18th centuries, and for a while in the 19th century, this was a bustling port, the center of the Newfoundland fishery. The rich merchants of Poole would send out hundreds of ships and thousands of men to Newfoundland each year. It must have been a busy, exciting place in those days. The pubs and alehouses echoing the tales of the voyages to the Newfound land, of icebergs and whales, and of a sea that was alive with monstrous fish. In place of those little boats would be tall, proud sailing ships. And one night, a young boy of 14 by the name of Robert Tucker would creep on board and stow away. That ship was bound for Newfoundland. There the young fellow would stay, settle in Scilly Cove, and eventually raise a family. Otto was a direct descendant of that young stowaway, anxious to trace his roots and make some contacts in the old country for the children back home.
I'm going to give them the names of some of the people I met, because these kids would like to write people in Poole. And then you would like to write back, maybe,
yeah,
eh?
Yeah.
That would be good. I'm the first of my family to return to Poole, to wander the streets and to look for the special places that link Newfoundland with this old city. They're hard to find. for it was a long time ago. And as you'd expect, memories of the Newfoundland trade upon which this city was built faded. Then too, Poole itself has changed. It's sprawled out now in all directions from the main harbor. And even the streets that once would have been lined with sailmakers, rope makers, anchor smiths, shipwrights, now cater to a different clientele altogether. Actually, in recent times, people have flocked here from all over the world to enjoy the soft, balmy Atlantic breezes and to enjoy the peace and quiet of old England.
You can have a pair of green ones or a pair of pink ones, and I'll put you the extra towels on the top. Right, you wanted to say...
On a trip like this, you find yourself listening to the voices,
Take a pair of the bath towels.
staring at the
a pair
faces.
of the bath towels, a matching pair of hand
The
towels
place
together.
is decidedly foreign, yet vaguely familiar.
Coffee and cream. Now, seriously.
Tucker is a common name here, and that makes it harder to trace. But you know, I keep on trying. St. James Church. Boy, this is a special place. You know, thousands of our ancestors were baptized and married in this old church right here in the heart of Poole. Inside, you can see majestic pillars made of beautiful white pine, cut from the forests of Trinity Bay, perhaps by my own ancestors. In going through the records, I discovered that a very prominent parishioner was really a Newfoundlander, born, in fact, in my own home village. The deputy mayor of Poole, Peter Coles, told me about him.
Well, in the council chamber, we have a list of all the mayors from very early days in Poole. And here is a list which, in fact, starts with the mayor of Poole in 1752, John Masters, who was, in fact, the only mayor of Poole who was actually born in Newfoundland, in Scilly Cove, in Trinity Bay. Many of the other mayors that you see here made their fortune in the Newfoundland trade, but John Masters was the only one that was actually born in Newfoundland and then came across here and became mayor of Poole.
Many indeed made their fortunes in the Newfoundland trade. You can see evidence of it in and around Poole today. The spacious grounds of Upton House are now maintained as a public park. Ordinary citizens can now relax and stroll through beautiful grounds that were once the private domain of extremely well-to-do people. Merchant princes who amassed fortunes by sending ships and men to Newfoundland. This estate belonged to William Spurrier, a rich West Country fish merchant in the middle of the 18th century, a time when salt cod was a staple food throughout Europe, a time when the Newfoundland fishery was a lucrative business. But it's not in the mansions and estates of Poole that Newfoundlanders will find their roots. It's here in the rolling hills and vales of Dorset and Devon. From the villages and farms, soft, gentle country, the land of King Arthur and King Alfred, the land of Celt and Roman, of Saxon and Norman, rich in history, rich in soil, yet somehow still regarded by most Englishmen as rather quaint, remote, untouched. Why did they leave this rich, beautiful landscape for the tough life of a fisherman on the rocky coast of Newfoundland? Well, tough as life must have been in 18th century Newfoundland, it was tougher still here in Dorset. The young, the landless from the crowded farms and towns and the ports could make 3 times as much money by signing on the pool ships as Newfoundland men. And so farmers became fishermen, and Newfoundland was born. Here we'd be, maybe, if our ancestors hadn't decided to switch to codfish 200 years ago. And this is the land the old people, our ancestors, lived in. Look closely and roam about, and you'll find people and you'll hear voices and words that remind you of home. In the Blackmore Vale and in the valley of the Stour, you'll find tantalizing touches that tell you you're close to your roots. You will find old words that are alive and well in the northern bays of Newfoundland today. Words that in England would mystify all but the true Dorset man, such as Rupert Rose, who invited us to his home outside Sturminster Newton.
If I said to you, you should throw water on that fire, some people would say that would put the fire out. What would you say?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's putting out.
Putting out, or what else?
Well, doubting.
Doubting. That's exactly what we would say.
Yeah.
That's exactly what was. Now, if there were sparks coming out of that fire.
Flankers.
What's that?
Flankers.
Flankers. That's exactly what we would say.
Yes.
So there are words.
Words and phrases known only to Outport Newfoundlanders and West Country Englishmen tumble easily from the lips of Mr. Rose. Here, then, is the source of our language, our patterns of speech.
Hay crops burnt and straw crops burnt like that.
Names, words, places, touches of our past jump out at us in this distant land across the sea.
You'll find yourself poring over church records, wandering through old graveyards, searching for names and dates, connecting them with friends and families back home. I just had to see Wimborne Minster. This was the place marked on the tombstone in Winterton. Wimborne Minster, the name of a mysterious, faraway place to me when I was a youngster. A name that I copied down in my scribbler. The names on the tombstones here are faded too, just as they have in the Winterton churchyard. Yet I know this is where many of my people and my friends and neighbors in Winterton came from. Wimborne Minster.
Dorset, Devon, Hampshire, Somerset. These are the places we came from. The ancient kingdom of Wessex, the country Thomas Hardy wrote of in his novels, the land of Tess and the mayor of Casterbridge. Heartland for thousands of Newfoundland families. Bonavista Bay, Trinity Bay, Notre Dame Bay, Fortune Bay, all these places are rooted here.
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating. This is the old town of Yeovil, Y-E-O-V-I-L. And one of the early fishermen, very young fishermen from this area who came to Poole and came out to Trinity Bay, was born and raised here in Yeovil. He married in my village in Winterton back in the early 1800s. He had a large family, and there are Bantons now on both sides of Trinity Bay and up as far as Thornlea. And in Winterton itself, one of the most prosperous fishing families is the Banton family in Winterton. And they're going to be absolutely thrilled to know that I came to Yeovil and I'm here standing in the oldest part of this town. Here's the old church that goes way back for hundreds of years. And here to my right is the old school that goes back to what I think is something in the 1400s. And all around is the old village.
You know, there was one old fisherman back home in Newfoundland who could describe the streets of this town minutely, though he'd never been to England in his life.
Now, I want a real good Yeovil smile. A good Yeovil smile, okay? Oh, that is beautiful. You're gorgeous. How's that? Okay.
It must have torn them apart, you know, to leave this beautiful country forever. Most of them were youngsters when they left, teenagers looking for work, out to make money.
Come on.
Most came back home, but some decided to stay. And in time, memories of the hills and vales of old Dorset faded. We have a place called Hermitage in Newfoundland. This is also Hermitage. And we have Hounsels, too. This family's name is Hounsel.
The Hounsel is a well-known Newfoundland name.
That's super.
There are Hounsels in White Bay, Hounsels in Bonavista Bay. Some of the Hounsels have been well known, very famous in Newfoundland as fishing captains.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, what was your father's name?
Frank Redford's Hounsel.
Oh, and do you remember your grandfather?
No, I'm afraid.
You don't remember his name?
No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
I only have her out of gran, and she died with her.
And so, you see, this trip to Old England was a kind of homecoming to Otto Tucker. It was obvious that these were the descendants of the people we left behind, that these were the places our people once lived in.
Just moved in from just up the road, actually. We were sort of thinking about it.
It stirred the blood to gaze at those ancient castles and towns and to let the imagination run wild. Our land is so young, our history so short in the New World. But then this is our history too. For our ancestors built these castles and knocked them down too, I suppose. It's fascinating to reach back, to reflect on the history of your people, and to think of them leaving for Newfoundland so many years ago.
Here we are coming across. There's Ontario, Quebec.
Yeah.
And here is Newfoundland out here. Newfoundland and Labrador. The name of the province is the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Remember the story I was telling you? The story of how the people from Dorset came and settled in the area known as Trinity Bay? Well, here's Newfoundland, the island of Newfoundland, and here's the capital, St. John's, and here are the bays. And here is Trinity Bay here. Do you see that? And here's the little village I come from, Winterton. Winterton. It was one time called Scilly Cove, after the Isles of Scilly in England. And here's the bay, and here's the town of Trinity over here, where my great-grandfather, Robert Tucker from Poole, settled. Now, I live here in St. John's now, because I teach at the university. But I was born and raised in that tiny little village.
Winterton, Trinity Bay, a long way from the west country of England, yet not a long way, where these houses, these castles, these hills and fields remain a part of us. For most of us, our roots are lost or hopelessly entangled. And that doesn't matter much either, for half the fun is in the quest itself, in meeting people and seeing those special places. Why do we do it? Is it a search for identity, a sense of place? Why do people search for their roots?
I think it's a desire to understand yourself, know who you are, really. What your past is, what your heritage is, what makes you the kind of person you really are. Part of that is your history. Part of that is your family. And this is why, I suppose, I've always had this kind of interest, wondering what kinds of people are in my background, what kinds of men and women left England and came to Newfoundland and settled on the rugged shores of Trinity Bay. And it's a great thing to be here looking out over this countryside, knowing that some of them came from this area, up around here. And I guess I'd have to be either a poet or a painter or a novelist to be able to express precisely how I feel. I can say there's a great feeling, and perhaps some people in Trinity Bay would understand what I mean when I say I feel that I'm standing on sacred ground.
The West Country of England, an ancient, splendid land. We came from here a long time ago. Not all of us are of English descent. In fact, nearly half of us came from the rich fields and green glens of Ireland.
Yeah, like, was your father, was he old, and all that?
No, he was 72 when he died, but my father laid down the laws.
Was he mean or anything like that?
No. My father was a big man. Never stopped a hair on his head. He had a foxy moustache round up under his eyes, and his eyebrow was coming down to meet his moustache. He'd want an iron rake to clear it out.
It's hard to imagine someone more Irish than Nick Murphy. Yet he's never been to Ireland, nor his father, nor his father's father before him. And young Sean, he's 7 or 8 generations removed. Yet the language they speak, the words and expressions they use, are as Irish as can be. Newfoundland is like that. While the voices of the Vales of Dorset are heard in the northern bays, here on the Cape Shore and on the southern shore, there's a distinctive Irish flavour that has not faded with the years. And there's a pride in the people who first broke the soil here.
Nick, you still have a hard time ploughing all the stuff, the ground up and that?
No, we hadn't, sure. We had all kinds of means to plough land. We had horses, ploughs. We had disharrows. We had all kinds of equipment to clear out ground, land, tear it up and plough it up, cultivate it. But you take all them old fellas come from Ireland that had nothing on their 2 hands, and they cleared this place out of the forest. Look all over this place here. The vast majority of that land that you're looking at now is cleared like that.
And all that to be cleared by 2 hands?
Right, with their 2 hands. When they come from Ireland and docked here, so they had nothing. Nothing, they hadn't a place to live in, only a shack they built in the forest.
For centuries, settlement in Newfoundland was officially discouraged. Early attempts at colonization had failed, and the authorities in Britain had decided that Newfoundland would best remain an overseas fishing station and a training ground for the Royal Navy. But despite the rules and regulations, people stayed. The English mainly in the north and west, and the Irish mainly in the southeast. And finally, one day, the big ships stopped coming from England and Ireland. The migratory fishery had died. We were on our own. Many Irishmen had settled in St. John's, greatly swelling the population of what was to eventually become Newfoundland's capital city. In 1 year alone, 6,000 landed here. Wander through Belvedere Cemetery. You will see their names on the tombstones. And on the more recent stones, you can see where they were born. Kilkenny, Waterford, Carrick-on-Shore. These are the places the immigrants, our ancestors, came from. Some turned to farming here on the outskirts of St. John's. The climate was severe, the forest dense, and the soil rocky. But prices for produce were good here on this island of fishermen, so they persevered. Still, ground like this must have broken the heart, if not the back, of many a Wexford man. Allie O'Brien's family has been on this land since 1820, and they've been in Newfoundland long before that. Yet the pioneering days are not over yet. Allie is still clearing land from the forest. But 'twas the old people, he figures, did most of the really hard work.
It was remarkable that they cleared so much land. There was this place, there was a sale in 1849. My great-grandfather offered this place for sale, and he then had 14 acres cleared. And that is as much as there were on the farm until, say, 20 years or so ago, when my brothers and I cleared an extra 4 or 5. So there was a great deal of work done. I know from my own experience here that when I was growing up, there was a considerable amount of hardship in life here. And I've often thought of them coming to this rather harsh, certainly harsh climate, and very difficult land to clear. I think the very fact of ownership of land must have been something precious to them. At home, you see, they were dispossessed. That's an historic fact. That they would not have owned an acre of land. They wouldn't have owned a square foot of land.
A landowner in a new country, new opportunities, a new life. It must have meant a lot to those early settlers. But would the old Irish traditions be lost? And what about Gaelic, the ancient Irish language? Would it be forgotten? Ali's grandmother, who died before Ali was born, could speak it, and his father encouraged him because he said it had a melodious sound. So on his own, here on the farm, he studied the language of his ancestors. While learning the old language, he also became fascinated with Irish and Newfoundland history and genealogy, with its literature and poetry. Ali, you must have a great interest in your Irish background. You've learned the language.
Yes, I have a fair knowledge of it. I suppose I'm really not fluent. I would want to be in an Irish-speaking area for a while. But I do know a little of it, all right. I'm able to read it reasonably well. And that's in itself, I suppose, is an accomplishment.
So the Irish tradition is pretty strong. I believe there were even songs and poems written here in Irish.
Oh, yes, indeed. Certainly the noted one, Talamh Mapamara, he came here, we're told, in 1745. And he wrote 4 or 5 poems, in which some of them actually, Newfoundland is mentioned specifically. Even St. John's, Ballyshine, St. John's Town.
He wasn't too impressed with the place, was he?
No, really, he wasn't, because his noted song, Bon Cnicair No, is the song of an exile. He compares conditions here in Newfoundland to what they would be in Ireland, and he longs for the day when he can return. Be bannacht chrí go tíana héan, Bon Cnic éan ó. Chunam wedin de hílrach iris éve, Bon Cnic éan ó. I
do not see the herds going out to the fields, or the cattle being driven to the pastures. But I see only the ships being driven by the wild winds, and the great seas here on every side.
Ach barca da seola le fornas be, is farigi móra go jol in a day. Go vacir fós me.
Oh, that I were home in Ireland.
Bon Cnic éidean ó. Is trua nach misha in éidean.
Ireland, how green is it at all? A striking contrast to the cliffs and icebergs of Newfoundland. How lush and rich, especially here in the sunny southeast. This is the land of our ancestors, Waterford, Wexford, Kilkenny, Tipperary. It is to these counties that Irish Newfoundlanders must go to find their roots. For we came from this corner of Ireland. The Murphys, the O'Learys, the Whalens, the McCarthys, the Powers, the Walshes. They came because they were young, or eager, or desperate, or because life was hard and money scarce in this troubled country. It's an emotional experience for an Irish Newfoundlander to to visit this land.
It's a thrilling experience for me to be here in Ballymurphy. It is here on the slopes of the Blackstairs, overlooking County Carlow, County Wexford, and all of these places are the source areas of Newfoundlanders. It would be difficult for me to find roots of my own family. They left no records, but we are reasonably certain they came from County Kilkenny. I grew up in an area that was settled by Irish people, and in my own home I heard a great deal about Ireland.
Ireland has a long, tragic history. The penal laws, the uprisings and reprisals, the famines, the evictions, the mass migration of millions. Little wonder there's an anger and a sadness here in Ireland, mingled with the music and the laughter. Little wonder there's a passionate interest in history that others may find difficult to comprehend. In Danny Dowling, Ali O'Brien found a man who knows not only Irish history, but the Newfoundland connection.
And there were loads of icebergs.
We had a very mild winter.
You did, yes.
Very
But I
mild
believe
winter.
April was...
Oh, it was. Oh, terrible, terrible.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Yes. But in a place like this, I got to think of not of ice, but of all this beauty here.
Yes.
But this is the Arrigal Valley, isn't
the
it?
Arrigal Valley now.
Yes.
They say Ireland is a land of saints and scholars. Shrines and holy wells abound in the countryside. This place is of special interest to Irish Newfoundlanders.
Mullinakil.
That's right.
That's interesting because I heard at home certain place names. I heard them as a boy in my own house, but
Yes.
I don't recall Mullinakil. I certainly remember Mullinavat.
Yeah, Mullinavat. Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. And Mullinavat is quite near here, actually, only a
Yes.
few miles.
Ah, yes.
Here, of course, at Mullinakill now, where we now stand, the dedication to St. Moling still survives after all the
Yes,
centuries.
It does.
After all, he was a man of the 7th century.
Yes.
And that is a long time ago.
Yes.
And as well, of course, like a lot of the people, I would say, who went from this area to Newfoundland in the original, say, way back in the 18th century
Yes.
and the early 19th centuries, I'm sure they came and prayed here,
Yes.
and probably before they left they came and said a prayer to Moling
Isn't that-
to guide them
Isn't that?
on their way and to bring them safely to the New World.
Of course.
Yes, there's no doubt that this place is a hallowed spot,
Yes, of
in
course.
the sense that
Yeah.
men
Ali O'Brien and Danny Dowling, two men an ocean apart,
prayed here.
yet linked by a common heritage. Kindred spirits sharing a moment together in this ancient, holy spot. Here in Old Ireland, it's easy to get lost in the mists of time. At times, the distant past seems as vivid as yesterday. This place, for instance, St. Mullins in County Carlow. It dates back 1,400 years, a time when Ireland was entering its golden age, when it was the centre of European culture and learning, the bastion of Christianity. In this ancient graveyard are buried many of our Newfoundland ancestors, for St. Mullins is the centre of the region our people came from. While most Irish are descended from the original Celtic people, there is Viking blood here too. Other invaders have left their mark, the Anglo-Normans in particular. Half of the Newfoundland Irish bear Norman names. For Ali O'Brien, this graveyard, thousands of miles from home, is not foreign soil. Except for the antiquity of the place, it could have been a cemetery back home in St. John's.
Of all the stones that I have read, I've only come across two names that I don't remember having met in Newfoundland. And one was Hendrick. I don't remember these, but all the others, Murphy, Shea, Brennan, Doyle, O'Brien, all of these. Kavanagh, of course, who were the kings of this area and who had their castle in Bardas. They were the Murphy Kavanaghs. Actually, they were descended from the McMurrows, you see. And Murphy, of course, we have many Murphys in Newfoundland. Well, I suppose they top the list of Irish names. I'm unable to trace where the O'Briens came from. certainly Carlow Kilkenny, and they may very well have been in this area. We're on the border of County Kilkenny here. We're in County Carlow, and certainly it is quite possible that they could very well be some of my people there. When you see those there, the ancestors of so many of my own neighbours at home, it is fascinating, really. Hard to express. Almost no time for levity, more time for contemplation. You do get a feeling, certainly the antiquity of it and the connection, and when you think going back to the 7th century or the late 6th century, certainly very impressive. Yeah, particularly on this morning seems to be just suitable for a soft morning with some sunshine and some grey skies, set in this lovely valley.
In the graveyards of Ireland, you may see the names of your distant ancestors. But it's in the streets of Ireland that you meet your distant cousins, maybe?
Well, your name is O'Brien, I believe.
Yes.
Isn't that grand? You're Joseph.
Yes.
Yes, from Mooncoin.
Yes. Sure, present.
Yes, my name is O'Brien too. And I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland, in Canada, way across the ocean.
How did you get here? By plane or boat?
Oh, we came by plane, of course, all the way. It's a long trip. And my people came from here, somewhere in this area, 200 years ago. Lived here 200 years ago and went to live in Newfoundland. And we could very well be cousins. We could indeed. Yes, myself and Joseph. Look up Newfoundland now in your geography books. Won't you?
Yep.
Do you know what when our people went out to Newfoundland first, what they called it? They called it Talamh and Eisc, the land of fish. You remember that?
Yeah.
You tell me something about yourself.
I'm from Shore Crescent.
Oh, this little lad.
And I'm from Shore Crescent too.
Yes. You like school as well?
No.
No? You don't? Yes. Well, do you know the song, Rose of Mooncoin?
Well, not really. I do.
No, you do?
Yeah.
I bet you do. Are you going to sing it for us? Well, I tell you, boys, it's grand. It's lovely to talk to you, because all these men are Irishmen back after 200 years. Wouldn't think we were 200 years old, would you? No. And what's your name?
Richard O'Brien.
There's another O'Brien, look. Richard O'Brien. It's marvellous to meet another O'Brien.
I wonder, will those Irish youngsters remember this man from Talamh and Eisc? I bet they will. The main migration of Irish to Newfoundland was in the late 1700s and in the early days of the last century, long before the famine. And there are those who say that St. Brendan came to Newfoundland way back in the 6th century. At any rate, it's a long historic connection. We two peoples are closely related, and Irish visitors to the Cape Shore and southern shore of Newfoundland are astounded by the Irishness of these places. One of them was a young poet from Carrick-on-Shore, Michael Cody.
Yes.
Felt like home in many ways.
Yes, I was going to ask you what were so many of our people came from the Shore Valley.
Yes.
And certainly from Carrick.
Yes.
And I was wondering what just were your impressions? Did you find that?
Well, it was very, very strange experience, because usually the traffic is the other way. People come here to find their roots. And
Yes.
in some senses I was discovering some cultural roots on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yes, of course.
And it was very moving in ways, you know, very different in some ways. The landscape is very different.
Yes.
But in other respects, the people, their accent, their attitudes, their ways.
Yes.
Especially the people I met in places like Point Lance,
of course,
fishermen in Point Lance and Branch, and places like that.
Yes.
I could have been at home or in maybe even further back, my father's time or my grandfather's time, possibly in some ways. We have perhaps changed more in Ireland than some of the communities in Newfoundland have yet, though I'd say the change is rapid everywhere now.
Yes.
But landscape is one of the big differences.
Of course it is.
And
of
around
course,
us here.
it's certainly. This is what I often think of the experiences of our ancestors that would have left this lush countryside, this beautiful valley.
Yes.
And while as
some of the best land in Ireland.
Yes, indeed. As a Newfoundlander, I recognise the beauty of my own little island.
Yeah.
But it's a different type. It is a wild, rugged country.
Oh, yeah.
And how the first people who went out there to Newfoundland, how they adjusted.
Yes.
I often think of their first winters and their first springs.
Yes, it must have been a terrible challenge.
Yes, indeed. And they lived, the pioneers lived in what is known as...
There are 3 rivers in this part of Ireland. They call them the Three Sisters, the Barrow, the Nore, and the Suir. For our ancestors, these were the arteries of migration. Down these rivers they'd come, from the farms and villages of the southeast counties, eager for a birth to the new world, to a life of pulling codfish from the icy waters of Talamh and Eisc, the land of fish. From the towns they came too, from Carrick and New Ross, from Gregnamana and Innistheg, Irishmen, youngsters, enticed from their troubled land by the promise of wages, freedom, adventure. Waterford is an old historic place, a Viking city-state first, then an Anglo-Norman town. It was one of the main ports of departure for the Newfoundland fleet. In one spring alone, 6,000 men sailed from here. Many of our ancestors came from Waterford, as you'd expect. The English sailing ships would arrive here to stock up on salt beef and pork and other produce for the long voyage, and to top off their cruise. The names on the storefronts are all Newfoundland names too. In fact, Waterford in many ways resembles St. John's. You don't have to be a historian to see the connection between the two places. You can see it, you can feel it. In spiritual matters, Newfoundland was destitute in the early days. It was a wild, lawless place, a frontier society. Fishermen scattered in 1,000 coves without benefit of church or clergy, or government for that matter. Tucked away, hidden almost in the back streets of Waterford, Ali found an old 18th century church that was closely linked with the beginning of the Irish presence in Newfoundland.
St. Patrick's Church is very significant for us because it was to this place that the fisher people who settled in Newfoundland, they would come back here to have their children baptized and, of course, named, christened. And their names are inscribed, I'm told, on the registers of this church.
To walk the streets of old Waterford, to gaze upon those special places that were known and loved by our ancestors, was a rich experience for Ali O'Brien. To look at the faces of our distant cousins, to hear their voices, to let your mind wander back to that time long ago when thousands of Irish youngsters many of them not much older than these school children, would seek their fortune on another island on the other side of the ocean, Talamh and Eisc. Those days are long gone. The tall sailing ships are no more. Ireland has entered a new age. But the freighters and tankers still have to watch the tides and currents in the Waterford estuary just as they did years ago. Sailing ships had an especially difficult time of it. Because of that, the passengers would normally walk to a place called Passage and board the ships there. It's funny. Each place we visited, as we traced the steps of our ancestors, seemed to be more and more like home. Maybe it was the rocky hills on the back of Passage, or the smell of the salt water. Or maybe it was the people we met on the wharf.
Your name?
I'm a Bulger.
Bulger, there you are.
Tommy Joe.
Our nearest neighbour was Jim Bulger. Yes.
All over here. Bulgers are everywhere.
Yes, of course. Well, that's really a Wexford name.
Is, yeah.
Yes.
Wexford, Waterford, Kilkenny, Tipperary, places that our people came from. But here in Passage is where they would have said their last farewell before they boarded the sailing ships for Newfoundland.
To think that on this spot, 200 or more years ago, my great-great-grandfather stood for the last time on his way across the ocean to Newfoundland, as did the ancestors of thousands of others of Newfoundland families. Talamh and Eisc, the land of fish, a wild, rocky country they were going to, lawless and untamed. They tell us here in Ireland that it was this pub, this halfway house on the road to Passage, is where they would stop for the last pint. Might as well go in for one.
It's been a sentimental journey, a kind of homecoming for Ali O'Brien. He's the first of his family to return. The first one back in 200 years.
As a descendant of people who left these shores to cross the Atlantic Ocean 200 years ago, and being back here, retracing their steps in a way, has been an unforgettable experience for me. As I look down on the valleys of the Suir, the Barrow, the Nore, and the Slaney, I couldn't help but being sentimental. I think it was a very natural thing. As I try to reconstruct and picture in my mind their feelings as they left this beautiful country to undertake a perilous voyage across the Atlantic, which took 6 or maybe 8 weeks in those days, and to think of them settling on the rugged coastline of Newfoundland. How they adapted to the new way of life there is a tremendous tribute to their genius and their desire for survival. Wherever they went, they made a great contribution to the new countries, and we're certainly all in North America, certainly the richer for that. For myself, I hope I'll be able to come back.
And so, many years ago, men and women raised in the gentle climes of England and Ireland sailed across the stormy North Atlantic to a new land and a new life here on the edge of the Western world. They settled on the coast, for they knew that the sea, not the land, would be their treasure. but they'd cleared the land too and coaxed the thin soil. And built their homes from the trees of the forest and became Newfoundlanders. Generations passed, and memories of the old countries across the sea faded, but did not die. And so today, hundreds of years later, people look back with pride and curiosity at an earlier time, hundreds of years ago, when our two founding peoples, just youngsters from the farms and villages of Dorset and Devon in England, of Waterford and Wexford in Ireland, sailed to this wild new land across the ocean and decided to stay.